What's going on, everyone? My name's Tenebris Infinite, and this video is serving almost as a part 2 to how to make our bullets more awesome in Generation 0. Because, sure, it would be awesome for us to do more damage to machines, have reasons to use a variety of ammunition in the game, and have some unique, more realistic results from the bullets we use. But then, on the other hand, it'd be pretty sick to see the machines have more dramatic long-term effects with how they fight us, to balance the scale, so to speak. A lot of people hope for survival elements in Generation 0, and I think this would add a meaty layer to surviving the Swedish apocalypse. What I'm talking about is a rework of the status effect system, and the addition of one key status effect that would raise the machine's threat level from the level it is to a truly apocalyptic one. Right now in GZ we have 3 status effects: burning, poison, and radiation, but with the addition of bleeding and some changes to how these status effects work, we could see these become much more threatening than they already are. As they stand, each of these serve as either a damage over time factor or damage buff to us. But what if poisoning really did poison us? What if radiation was something we couldn't ignore? And how would bleeding transform the early, mid, and late stages of the game? Well, let's start off with bleeding, as it would have the biggest impact on every combat encounter we face. Even from the beginning of the game, blood loss could be a constant threat. The way I think bleeding could work would be any source of damage can cause bleeding that isn't a flamethrower, meaning any melee attack, any gunshot, or even explosion damage could all cause your character to start bleeding and have a small health chip until you heal the bleeding with specific gauze bandages you could find around the world, same as any medkits or adrenaline would spawn. This would mean even in the early game, getting shot too many times could cause you to be in a rough state and require you to stop the bleeding. And my thought is, as you go up in class, you get a higher chance of having bleeding applied, to really up the feeling of each class of machine becoming more deadly. Up until the point where if you want to fight the Reaper or Apocalypse class machines, you need to be well prepared beforehand with proper healing supplies. This chance of blood loss would mean even Phoenix Hunters with their Stormtrooper aim could be a risk if they manage to get you. And even crazier, this blood loss chance could apply to machines that have different status effects on their bullets, like Apoco Doggos and tanks, as well as the Reaper, who, after all these stat effect changes, would be one of the craziest things. A real friggin' boss machine. One huge thing these new healing items could bring too are healing animations, giving us the chance to have our character do like little bits of immersive things while we fight the machines that would add up all over the experience. I think having a bit of a stronger focus on immersion with feature changes like this and the bullet changes would lead to a way more, I don't know man, fulfilling combat experience. Not to say the combat isn't fulfilling in Generation 0, as it's actually really awesome and a huge reason why I love the game, but it would just add this really meaty layer to it for people to engage in. Now for fire damage, and taking it from it is as a damage over time feature to become a movement hindrance that damages you while you move if you don't heal the burn off. So, of course, suspension of disbelief in healing burns in seconds, but if burns became a source that damages you only while moving after being applied, this would be a crazy thing, dude! You could stand around and let yourself become a human kebab, and maybe have a tiny chance of avoiding the burn. But, on the other hand, it could actually prove to be a pretty tactical experience, where you have to make sure you're avoiding that flamethrower if you don't have any burn cream on you, because traveling to find burn cream could be more difficult when you're constantly having your health taken away from just simply walking. And again, when dealing with enemies like an Apocalypse tank or the Reaper that have incendiary rounds, you still will face the risk of having bleeding applied to you alongside having burns applied to you. To heal the burns, you'd need to find a burn cream that could come with an animation of you pulling out the salve, giving it quick use, and then putting it away. And the thing too is these healing items could be incredibly light so that they aren't something to weigh us down too much, but instead just something added to the mix. Also, this M1 I made in Tarkov, jeez dude, it's too good, man. I wish someday that we'll see Generation 02 set in modern times. It'd be so sick to use state-of-the-art weapons on these machines, man. But let's look at an aside here before we move on to the next status effect. What would happen if this stat effect kills us? And I have a pretty simple solution. If you use adrenaline, then the stat effect is still there, seeing as your character is pretty much getting back up and going after using adrens. But if you run out of adrenaline and need to respawn, then that makes your character refresh and have no stat effects. Simple solution, I think, but what do you guys think? Should adren heal stat effects, if they were to take this form, of course? Okay, so now for a kinda easy one, as it wouldn't realistically change too much. Just maybe be toned down a little to make it have a longer lasting effect. But poisoning and poison damage. This is primarily from Apoco doggos and ticks, and could have a building effect instead of a chance effect. You don't get poisoned until you reach 100%, but when you do, it steadily ticks down your health at like 1 HP every 2 to 3 seconds. My logic for this is you get a lot of poison damage in general from the doggos and ticks catching you out. So instead of it just happening randomly from these guys, it'd be a slightly more predictable effect. The steady ticking of damage too could possibly be ignored for a while. At least until the end of combat, unlike the other effects that take more immediate attention. The healing animation could be taking a few antibiotic pills that then slowly reduce the poisoning, meaning if you're in combat, taking the pills might stave off poisoning if you use them early on, and also meaning that taking them mid-fight isn't going to insta-heal the stat effect like bleeding or burns would. So, again, you'd have to make sure that you aren't getting further poisoned in order to properly heal it off. Now for the final form of damage, and the one I think should be the deadliest of all the status effects. Radiation. This rare form of damage only comes from Apocalypse Hunters, Apocalypse Harvesters, and then the Reaper. As a form of damage you don't encounter too often, I think it would be crazy if this was the death status of the game, doing obscene damage when hitting 100%. Kinda similar to Poison's effect, radiation could be a building status effect, but instead applying increasing damage as the effect gets higher in its percent. It could even be really hardcore and have a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1 is like 1% and 100 is like 100% of your health. Now, this damage could be applied as the damage builds, so it wouldn't be a damage over time, but if you hit 100% radiation, then get hit by any further radiation, that's it, man. Say goodbye to your adrenaline. This way, you wouldn't die immediately after using an adren, but you'd be on the verge of it if you're stuck in a fight, making it an effect you'd absolutely want to avoid at all costs, as it could potentially death loop you. Healing this could be kinda like the poison healing, with popping a simple anti-rad pill that maybe looks a little different from the antibiotic ones. But unlike poison, it would insta-heal all the radiation immediately. Though, these guys could be made pretty rare, or expensive to craft. So just like the bullet video, this one is a huge idea, from animations to status effects that all play out slightly differently, the benefit of new healing items that could provide new opportunities of using items in your inventory, to having more tense combat experiences with effects that you need to properly prepare for or take care of afterwards. So please, let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Is this a direction you'd like to see Generation Zero take, or do you think this is maybe a little too hardcore? Totally understandable if this isn't everyone's cup of tea for a future update. But, my dudes, I just want to say thank you very much for watching. If you haven't, maybe drop a like on the video. It goes a huge way in showing your support. But, for now, I will catch you all in the next one. Until then, peace.